Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and today I have on a very special guest, John, or who you might know as JdoubleR2. Now, John is a seasoned player on Arena. He's been at the top of the ladder before, ranking #1 in Constructed, and right now he is currently in the top 100 players. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, nice to be here.
Now, how did you get started with Magic in the first place?
What brought me in was actually a buddy of mine. He's actually from here in St. Louis. We actually went to Chicago, and his friends that we were staying with actually had a bunch of Magic cards, and they had a box set of like Gate Crash, and we decided to do like a little draft. We all would just, staying up all night and just having a good time as friends. But little did I know I was going to get hooked on the card game since then, and I've been loving it.
That's pretty special for me because Gate Crash was actually the first set I got to work on when I came to Wizards, believe it or not. What was your favorite card in Gate Crash?
Probably Prime Speaker Zagana. It was kind of like Craces, a more toned down version of Craces, I guess.
I made Master Biomancer as one of the cards that I designed, and I was always trying to play these Master Biomancer Zagana decks where you would like play the Biomancer and then play Zagana, get a bunch of extra counters, draw cards. It was a good time for all. But speaking of cool designs, what are you playing right now?
It's actually a Jund Midrange deck. I know it seems kind of weird because it's not Sacrifice, but it's actually running very, very well right now.
Awesome. Well, today let's get into this Judd mid-range deck a little bit. And while we're here, I want to hear about how you build the deck and kind of the way you approach it, how maybe everyone out there can take your strategies to build decks even better. So if you were to sum up this deck in like a sentence or so, how would you say that it plays out?
Like the old modern Jund back in between probably 2014, 15. I think that it could be well positioned against the current meta.
So you looked over the standard metagame, and this is the deck you came up with. How did you arrive here in the first place? What led you to coming up with this kind of deck?
It feels very rewarding to fight through opponents' cards. I wanted to feel that satisfaction of taking down the Titan of the format, which is currently like the blue-green ramp decks, and it so far has been doing well.
Oh, that's awesome. If this deck can take down the top of the ramp decks, that is exactly the kind of deck you want to be playing right now. So you had this idea, you could kind of take down these ramp decks, and you were going to play a bunch of the strong cards in the format. Then how did you go about choosing which ones went in here?
The cards that would be most effective are like the exile cards. So like Agonizing Remorse, Each to Extinction Event. I wanted to make sure I had cards like those to be able to fight off like things like Euro, and fight off like Nissa, like Elspeth Conquers Death. Being able to permanently get rid of their cards is the main way to actually beat the ramp decks. So like Radha, she's just an insane card. Very, very, very good underrated card from M21. I also like the fact that Jund has a very good removal suite. So you have things like Eliminate, you have like Bone Crusher Giant, Liliana, as ways to get rid of like stuff like Dream Trawler. I actually had many games the past couple of days where my opponent scooped, like when I dropped a Liliana on the board. So you have like a ton of different tools that can, help you either deal with opponent's threats, or you can put the pressure on the opponent.
Yeah, so you're going to kind of have like a lot of options here. You've got some early game discard and cards like Agonizing Remorse. You've got some great early creatures like these Black Lance Paragons. And then you've got a few cards that are a little bit stronger in the late game too.
The way I look at it is you have to be able to have versatility in your deck. And that's one way to have versatility is having enough spells that you can cast early in the game to get you to the late game, as opposed to just worrying about, let's say you're playing like Ban Ramp. A lot of the cards in there aren't really going to be effective until you get to like, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. Whereas this deck, you have spells that actually matter starting on turn 2.
I'm noticing here, so you have these 2 Extinction Events, which is a really cool card, and we haven't seen a lot of that one show up in Standard.
Yeah, Extinction Event is one of those tricky cards where you kind of have to play your hand out in a way to where you can benefit most from it, and it doesn't have like much of a drawback, if any. That's one reason why I have so much like spot removal is so I can kind of like get to a point to where, an Extinction Event can be really devastating for the opponent. You had already, killed off all their odds, just their straight odds. Now they have all evens, or vice versa. probably don't ever see it coming, to be honest.
So one thing I noticed here is you use a lot of 2 and 3 ofs. You know, traditionally in deck building, a lot of people will say we want a bunch of 4s, we want 4 copies of your best cards, that's how we're gonna lay it out. In this deck in particular, you've got a number of 2 ofs. For example, you have 2 cultivates, you split your planeswalkers up a little bit, you've got 3 of the paragons. What was the decisions that went into making your choices for 2s and 3s of these cards?
This is actually one of my tips for deck building. You want to have the most amount of options. Like whenever you're drawing your hand and you have 2 or 3 of a certain card, that limits your options tremendously. So like if you have a handful of 4 different cards, like let's say 3 lands, you have 4 options as opposed to having, like, let's say you have 2 Nissas and then you have 2 Eliminates in your hand. Now you have, you know, 1 option one turn and you have 1 option another.
And additionally, it's not just for you. I would guess that also it probably makes it harder for your opponent, right? They're playing against you and they've seen a Bone Crusher Giant and an Eliminate and an Eat to Extinction, and they're like, what does he have next?
Correct. That's one thing that's really nice too, is your opponent's gonna have to keep guessing, like especially like games 2 and 3.
I'm curious, what are some of your other big deck building tips? If someone out there is aspiring to build decks of their own, what would you suggest?
One way I build decks is starting off, I'll throw a whole lot of different cards in the deck. I don't even like look at the number of cards I have in the deck. I just like, okay, this goes well in here, this goes well in here, this goes, like, you know, just put a whole bunch of cards in there that I think would go well. Once you get to, like, you know, let's say 70, 75 cards, you just be like, okay, now I'm gonna sculpt the deck.
So like a good sculptor, you start with kind of this big block of all these options and you chisel away at it slowly, trying to make like the perfect deck out of it. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, you just have like a block of ice. So you put all the water in, you freeze it, and then you chisel away all the unnecessary things.
So getting back into the deck a little bit, what are your matchups like?
It has been beating Bant Ramp, like kind of like destroying it, honestly. It's been beating Sultai Ramp. Reclamation is a little iffy. It all really depends on if you can hit your Return to Natures and your early threats. Each extinction is going to be very important in that matchup as well. It destroys aggro. Any aggro deck, if you're playing mono green, if you're playing mono black, if you're playing mono red, if you're playing Gruul, if you're playing well, Gruul's going to be a little bit tougher. If they go, you know, if they curve out and they have like multiple questing beasts, it can be a little tough though, because questing beast is like one of the hardest things to deal with for this deck. Rakdos Sack, if the opponent draws very, very well, it can be very difficult if you don't hit your sweepers. The other matchup that's going to be kind of hard for it is Flash. Simic Flash probably has an edge over this deck. Mono Blue Flash has almost no chance against this though. 2 toughest matchup would probably be Reclamation and Simic Flash.
And then hopefully that's where your sideboard's going to help you out, right? So looking down the sideboard options here, what are some of these cards for?
Okay, so Shifting Ceratops. There's 3 of those for both of the Flash matchups, and it's also for Reclamation. There's also Necromentia, and that is for Team Erect. I mean, it's for a couple other matchups too, but mostly for Team Erect. Return Natures are for Team Erect. Rakdos Sack is for mono green, believe it or not, because you can get rid of Great Hands, you can get rid of Stone Cold Serpent, which is very, very, very helpful. Against Sultai, you want Necromentia, you want Ceratops, you want Questing Beast. Any deck that plays Ugin, you want Questing Beast in there, you want Ceratops in there, just because you want the haste threats to be able to kill the Ugin. There's a bunch of cards in there that actually have like multiple matchups that they can come into.
Right, you look at a card like Ritual of Soot, and that can be good against a wide variety of decks.
It can even be good against midrange too, like Bant Ramp. Every single creature that they ever control on the board is always 3 or less mana cost.
Anything else about the deck you want to mention to everyone out there? I mean, it's a really cool looking deck. I think this is definitely a standard contender. Anything that you want to make sure people know about it if they go to give it a try?
Be careful with how you play your cards. Very careful, because if you have like an extinction event, just take extra damage if you can afford to take extra damage. Let's say you're 13 and you're going to get hit down to 7, but you have an extinction event to wipe out the entire board. Usually you want to just save it. Your life is a resource. That's the way I view it. You know, unless you get down in Questing Beast death range, you want to just wait it out. Going 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 1 for 1 the whole entire game is usually not going to work. So you have to try to find some way to 2 for 1 your opponent.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for all the tips for this deck. It looks like a lot of fun to play. Is there anything else you want to plug or anything that you're working on that you want to talk about?
I do have a YouTube that I actually will be posting on very, very soon. Subscribe on YouTube at Dub Nation MTG. and you'll see me posting some videos on there very soon.
Well, awesome. And I'll put a link to all this stuff in the description below. And what days do you stream every week normally?
About 3 times a week, between 6 and 9 p.m. Central Time. I'm actually going to be coming out with an actual schedule really soon.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned for his stream, and you might get to see this deck featured on stream. I'm sure it is a blast. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk with everyone out there again on Monday. In the meantime, may you Jund 'em out. You got this.